My name is Zelma Patterson, and I'm 72 years old. 3 days ago, my family left me in a hospital room believing I was dying, then drove to my house and started dividing up my belongings before my body was even cold. But I didn't die. The next morning, I woke up, fully conscious, fully aware, and heard the nurse on the phone with my daughter Pauline saying, "Mrs. Patterson has made a remarkable recovery. She's awake and alert." Through the phone, I heard Pauline's response. "What? That's impossible. The doctor said she wouldn't make it through the night." Not "thank God she's alive," not "I'm coming right there," just shock that I'd survived. And in that moment, lying in that hospital bed listening to my daughter's dismayed reaction to my survival, I realized something terrible. My family hadn't just given up on me. They'd been counting on me dying. Over the next 24 hours, I would discover exactly what my family had done while they thought I was dying. And what I learned would destroy every relationship I had, expose crimes they'd committed, and force me to choose between protecting the people I loved and protecting myself. But to understand how I ended up abandoned by my own family, left for dead while they pillaged my home, I need to take you back to the beginning. I was born in 1953, grew up in a working-class family, married Theodore Patterson when I was 21, and spent the next 50 years building a good life. Theodore worked as an electrician. I worked as a nurse at the county hospital. We saved carefully, invested wisely, and by the time Theodore died 8 years ago at 64, we'd built a comfortable nest egg. A paid-off house worth about $400,000, retirement savings of $350,000, and Social Security benefits. Theodore and I had 2 children, Pauline, now 48, and Curtis, now 45. I'd given both my children everything I could, paid for their college educations, helped with down payments on their first homes, babysat their children so they could work, been there for every crisis, every need, every request. I thought I'd been a good mother. I thought my children loved me. I was wrong. When Theodore died, I inherited everything. The house, the savings, everything. That's how marriage works. Everything we'd built together became mine. My children seemed supportive at first. They helped plan the funeral, cleaned out Theodore's closets, were present and caring. But about 2 months after Theodore's death, things changed. Pauline approached me one day with a proposition. "Mama, Curtis, and I have been talking," Pauline said. "We think you should sell the house." "Why would I sell my house?" I asked, confused. "Because it's too big for you alone," Pauline explained. "And you could use the money. You could move into a nice senior apartment, and the money from selling would give you security." "I don't need security," I said. "I have your father's pension and Social Security, and I like my house. I've lived here for 40 years. "But Mama, what about us?" Pauline asked. "What about you?" I replied, genuinely not understanding. "This is our inheritance," Pauline said. "Dad's money, his house. If you keep living here and spending money, there won't be anything left for us when you die." I was stunned. Theodore had been dead for 2 months, and my daughter was already worried about her inheritance. "Pauline, I'm 64 years old," I said. "I could live another 20 or 30 years. That's my house, my money. I'll spend it however I need to." "That's selfish," Pauline said coldly. "Dad worked hard for that money. He'd want it to go to his children, not be wasted on you living alone in a house you don't need." "Your father wanted me to be comfortable," I corrected. "That's why everything is in my name. That's why he made sure I'd be taken care of." Pauline left angry that day. And that was the beginning of years of my children treating me not as their mother, but as an obstacle to their inheritance. For the next 7 years, Pauline and Curtis applied constant pressure for me to downsize, simplify, or make estate plans that would benefit them. Every family gathering included comments about my house. "Mama, this house is too much for you to maintain." "Mama, you're wasting money on property taxes." "Mama, you should think about your children's future." They brought real estate agents to family dinners to give me estimates on what my house could sell for. They brought financial advisors to help me plan, but who really just wanted me to transfer assets to my children. They pestered me constantly about updating my will. "Who's your beneficiary, Mama?" Curtis would ask. "You and your sister equally," I'd answer. "But is that in writing, in a legal will?" Curtis would press. "Yes, I have a will," I'd confirm. "When was it last updated?" Pauline would ask. "Wills need to be updated regularly." "It's fine," I'd insist. But they wouldn't let it go. Every conversation, every visit, circled back to my money, my house, my estate plans. I started to dread seeing my own children. 1 year ago, I had a health scare that changed everything. I had a minor heart attack, what doctors call a warning heart attack. It required a 3-day hospital stay and some medication adjustments, but I recovered fully. But my children's response was telling. Within hours of hearing I was in the hospital, both Pauline and Curtis were there, not to comfort me, but to interrogate the doctors. "How serious is this?" Pauline demanded. "What's her prognosis?" Curtis asked. "How much time does she have?" Pauline pressed. The doctor looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Patterson had a mild myocardial infarction. With medication and lifestyle changes, she should be fine. This is a warning, not a death sentence." "But she could have another heart attack," Pauline asked. "Anyone could have another heart attack," the doctor said carefully. "But Mrs. Patterson is stable now." I watched this exchange from my hospital bed, seeing my children's disappointment that I wasn't dying. After I was released, my children's pressure intensified. "Mama, you need to get your affairs in order," Pauline insisted. "What if something happens to you?" "My affairs are in order," I said. "I have a will. Everything goes to you and Curtis equally." "But we need to make sure," Curtis said. "We need to see the will. We need to be listed on your accounts as beneficiaries." "Why?" I asked. "For efficiency," Curtis explained. "So when you die, we can access your accounts immediately without going through probate." "I'm not dying," I said firmly. "I had a small heart attack. I'm fine." "But you could die," Pauline said, "and we need to be prepared." Their concern wasn't about me. It was about making sure they could access my money the moment I died. 6 months ago, my children brought papers for me to sign. "What are these?" I asked, looking at the thick stack of documents. "Just estate planning paperwork," Pauline said dismissively. "Powers of attorney, beneficiary designations, that kind of thing." "I already have power of attorney documents," I said. "These are updated versions," Curtis explained. "More comprehensive." I started reading through the documents. They were dense legal language, hard to understand. "Don't you trust us?" Pauline asked when I hesitated. "We're your children. We're just trying to help you." "I want to have my lawyer review these first," I said. "Why?" Curtis challenged. "We're family. You don't need a lawyer for family documents." "I'd feel more comfortable if my lawyer looked at them," I insisted. Pauline and Curtis exchanged frustrated looks. "Fine," Pauline said coldly. "Have your lawyer look at them, but Mama, we're trying to help you, and you're acting like we're trying to cheat you." "I didn't say that," I started. "You implied it," Curtis interrupted, "by saying you need a lawyer to protect you from your own children." They left the documents with me and stormed out. I took the papers to my lawyer, Geneva Foster, who I'd known for 30 years. Geneva reviewed the documents carefully, and her expression grew increasingly concerned. "Zelma, do not sign these," Geneva said firmly. "Why, what do they say?" I asked. "These documents would give your children complete control over all your assets immediately," Geneva explained. "Not when you die. Now, they'd be able to access your bank accounts, sell your house, make all financial decisions. You'd essentially be giving away everything you own while you're still alive." "But they said it was just estate planning," I protested. "It's estate planning for them," Geneva said. "Not for you. Zelma, if you sign these, your children could clean out your accounts tomorrow and you'd have no legal recourse." I felt sick. My own children had tried to trick me into signing away everything I owned. "What should I do?" I asked. Don't sign, Geneva said simply. And Zelma, you might want to think about who you're trusting with your estate. 3 months ago, I confronted my children about the documents. I had my lawyer review the papers you gave me, I said during a family dinner at my house. And, Pauline asked. And she said they would give you complete control of all my assets immediately, I said. Not after I die, now. So, Curtis said, what's wrong with that? What's wrong is that you tried to trick me, I said. You told me they were simple estate planning documents. You didn't tell me I'd be signing away control of everything I own. We weren't trying to trick you, Pauline said defensively. We were trying to help you. By taking control of my house and my money, I challenged. You're old, Mama, Curtis said bluntly. You're not making good decisions. We need to protect you. Protect me from what? I asked. From yourself, Pauline said. From making bad financial decisions, from being taken advantage of. The only people trying to take advantage of me are you two, I said, my voice rising. That's not fair, Pauline shouted. Isn't it? I said. For 8 years, all you've talked about is my money, my house, your inheritance. You're not concerned about me. You're concerned about making sure you get what you think you're owed. We are owed, Curtis exploded. That's Dad's money, his house. He would have wanted us to have it. He wanted me to have it, I corrected. That's why he left everything to me, and it's mine to spend, to keep, or to give away as I choose. If you give it all away, we'll contest your will, Pauline threatened. We'll say you weren't in your right mind. Get out of my house, I said quietly. What? Curtis said. Get out, I repeated. Both of you. And don't come back until you can treat me like your mother instead of a bank account waiting to be cashed in. They left. We didn't speak for 3 months. 3 days ago, I had a second heart attack. This one was more serious than the first. I was at home alone when the chest pain started. I called 911 and paramedics rushed me to the hospital. The emergency room doctor, Dr. Opal Chen, examined me and ordered tests. Mrs. Patterson, you've had a significant cardiac event, Dr. Chen told me. We need to do surgery to place a stent in your coronary artery, but I need to be honest, the next 24 hours are critical. There are risks. What kind of risks? I asked, frightened. The surgery could cause complications, Dr. Chen explained gently. And even if the surgery goes well, your heart is weak. I can't make any promises about your recovery. Am I dying? I asked directly. I don't know, Dr. Chen said honestly. I hope not, but I need you to prepare for the possibility. Do you have family we should call? I gave them Pauline's number. 30 minutes later, both Pauline and Curtis arrived at the hospital. How is she? Pauline asked the doctor. Critical, Dr. Chen said. The next 24 hours will tell us a lot, but I need to prepare you. Mrs. Patterson may not survive the night. I saw something flash in my children's eyes. Not grief, not fear, something else. Something that looked like anticipation. Can we see her? Curtis asked. Briefly, Dr. Chen said. She needs rest. Pauline and Curtis came into my room. They stood at the foot of my bed, looking at me with expressions I couldn't quite read. How are you feeling, Mama? Pauline asked, her voice carefully modulated to sound concerned. Scared, I admitted. Is there anything you need to tell us? Curtis asked. Anything important. Like what? I asked. Like where your important documents are, Curtis said. Your will, your account information, just in case. Just in case I die, you mean? I said. Don't say that, Pauline said unconvincingly. But Mama, we need to know where things are, for practical reasons. Everything's in my filing cabinet at home, I said, too tired and scared to argue. Top drawer. And your house key? Curtis asked. We might need to get things from your house. In my purse, I said, gesturing to the chair where the nurse had placed my belongings. Pauline walked over and took my keys. We'll hold on to these, for safekeeping. They stayed for 10 more minutes, asking more questions about my finances, my accounts, where I kept important papers. Not once did they say, I love you. Not once did they hold my hand or comfort me. They just gathered information. Then they left, saying they'd be back in the morning. But I heard Pauline talking to Curtis in the hallway. The doctor said she probably won't make it through the night, Pauline whispered. Good, Curtis replied. That means we can finally get what's ours. Let's go to her house now, Pauline suggested. We can start sorting through things before she's even dead, Curtis finished. Isn't that smart? Pauline interrupted. It's smart. Once she dies, there will be lawyers and paperwork and complications. But right now, we have her keys and we know she's not coming home. Let's at least see what's there. I lay in my hospital bed, shocked and heartbroken, listening to my children plan to pillage my home before I was even dead. That night, I went into surgery. The doctor placed a stent in my artery. The surgery went well. And the next morning, I woke up. Alive, alert, aware. And ready to find out exactly what my children had done while they thought I was dying. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Hit that like button and turn on NOTIFICTONS. Drop a comment. What would you do in Zelma's situation? Should she confront her children? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, Australia? Let me know. I lay in my hospital bed the morning after my surgery, listening to Nurse Viola on the phone with my daughter Pauline. Yes, Mrs. Patterson has made a remarkable recovery, Viola said cheerfully. She's awake, alert, and her vitals are strong. The doctor is very pleased. Through the phone speaker, I heard Pauline's response. What? That's impossible. The doctor said she wouldn't make it through the night. Not thank God. Not that's wonderful news. Just shock, dismay, almost, anger that I'd survived. Well, medicine isn't an exact science, Viola said, clearly noting Pauline's strange reaction. Your mother is doing very well. Would you like to speak with her? No, Pauline said quickly. I'm at work. I'll come by later. Shall I tell her you called? Viola asked. Sure, Pauline said, then hung up. Viola turned to me with a concerned expression. Mrs. Patterson, I don't mean to pry, but your daughter didn't sound very happy that you're recovering. I noticed that too, I said quietly. Is everything all right with your family? Viola asked gently. I wanted to say yes, wanted to make excuses for my children like I'd been doing for years, but I was tired of lying. No, I admitted, everything is not all right. Do you want to talk about it? Viola offered. And suddenly, I did. I told Viola everything, about my children's obsession with my inheritance, their attempts to trick me into signing away my assets, what I'd overheard them say last night about going to my house while I was supposedly dying. Viola's expression grew increasingly troubled. Mrs. Patterson, that sounds like elder financial abuse, and possibly theft if they took anything from your house without permission. I don't even know what they did, I said. They have my keys. They went to my house last night, but I don't know what they took or what they're planning. You need to find out, Viola said firmly, and you need to protect yourself legally. How? I asked. Call your lawyer, Viola advised. Tell her what's happening, and Mrs. Patterson, don't tell your children you're awake yet. Let them think you're still unconscious. See what they do. I called my lawyer, Geneva Foster, from my hospital bed. Zelma, Geneva said warmly, I heard you were in the hospital. How are you feeling? Better than expected, I said. Geneva, I need legal advice urgently. I explained everything. The heart attack, my children's visit, their conversation in the hallway about going to my house, Pauline's dismayed reaction to learning I'd survived. Zelma, this is serious, Geneva said. If your children entered your house and took property without permission, that's theft. And if they're accessing your accounts or forging documents, that's fraud. What should I do? I asked. First, don't tell them you're awake and recovering, Geneva advised. Let's see what they do when they think you're still incapacitated. The nurse already told Pauline I'm awake, I said. But does Pauline know you're fully alert and aware? Geneva asked. Or does she think you're just physically awake but confused? I don't know, I admitted. Let's keep it vague, Geneva suggested. If they call or visit, act groggy and confused. Meanwhile, I'm going to do something that will protect you and gather evidence. What? I asked. I'm going to file an emergency petition with the court for a temporary injunction freezing your assets, Geneva explained. That means your children can't access your bank accounts, sell your house, or transfer any property until the court holds a hearing. Won't that make them angry? I asked nervously. Probably, Geneva admitted. But Zelma, your children have your house keys. They think you're dying or dead. If we don't act now, they could clean out your entire house and drain your bank accounts before you're even released from the hospital. Do it, I decided. File whatever papers you need to file. Good, Geneva said. I'm also going to request that the court appoint a temporary guardian for you, someone independent who can make sure your interests are protected, just until you're fully recovered and can handle things yourself. My children will claim I'm incompetent, I worried. Then we'll get a medical evaluation showing you're completely competent, Geneva said. Zelma, you just survived major heart surgery and you're speaking clearly and making rational decisions. You're obviously competent. Thank you, I said, tears forming. Geneva, I'm scared. These are my children, my own son and daughter. How did it come to this? I don't know, Geneva said gently. But we're going to protect you. I'll file the emergency petition this afternoon. The court will schedule a hearing within a few days. Until then, stay in the hospital where you're safe. That afternoon, Pauline and Curtis came to visit me at the hospital. I pretended to be more sedated than I was, keeping my eyes half closed and speaking slowly. Mama, Pauline said, approaching my bed, can you hear me? I mumbled as if barely conscious. The nurse said you're doing better, Curtis said, but you still seem pretty out of it. I didn't respond, just kept my eyes half closed. Do you remember anything from last night? Pauline asked carefully. I didn't answer. She's probably on heavy pain medication, Curtis said. She won't remember anything. Good, Pauline whispered. Then louder. Mama, we're here. We're taking care of everything. Don't worry about anything. Taking care of everything. That phrase sent chills through me. We went to your house last night, Pauline continued, speaking as if I couldn't hear or understand. We wanted to make sure everything was secure. We found your important papers, your will, your bank statements, everything. Did you see how much she has in savings? Curtis asked quietly. 350,000, Pauline confirmed. Plus the house worth about 400,000. That's over 700,000 split between us, 350 each. They were already dividing up my money, while I lay in a hospital bed, while they thought I couldn't hear them. We should update the will, Curtis said. Make sure it's legally solid so there are no complications. We can't update her will without her signature, Pauline said. Can't we forge it? Curtis suggested. She's basically unconscious. Who would know? That's too risky, Pauline said. But we can make sure we're listed as beneficiaries on all her accounts. The bank has those forms. We just need her signature. How do we get her signature if she's unconscious? Curtis asked. We can guide her hand, Pauline said. Like we tried with those power of attorney documents. If she's sedated enough, she won't even know what she's signing. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing steady, pretending to be unconscious while listening to my children plot to forge my signature on legal documents. Should we do it now? Curtis asked. Not yet, Pauline said. Too many nurses around. We'll come back tonight when it's quieter. They stayed for another 10 minutes, talking over me as if I were already dead, discussing how they'd sell my house, divide my belongings, and split the money. Then they left. And I opened my eyes fully, tears streaming down my face, and called Geneva. They're planning to forge my signature, I told Geneva. Tonight, they're coming back when there are fewer nurses to witness. I've already filed the emergency petition, Geneva said. The judge signed it an hour ago. Your assets are frozen as of right now. Your children can't access your accounts, can't sell your property, can't do anything without court approval. What about my house? I asked. They still have my keys, they can take things. I'm sending a locksmith to your house right now to change all the locks, Geneva said. And I'm requesting police supervision for property protection. Zelma, I've also filed for an emergency protective order requiring your children to stay away from you. A restraining order, I asked, against my own children. They're plotting to commit fraud, Geneva said firmly. They're trying to forge your signature. They're a danger to you financially and possibly physically. Yes, we need a restraining order. When is the court hearing? I asked. Tomorrow morning, Geneva said. Emergency hearing at 9 a.m. The judge wants to hear testimony from all parties. Can you be there? I'm still in the hospital, I said. I'll arrange for testimony by video conference from your hospital bed, Geneva said. The important thing is that you tell the judge exactly what happened, what you overheard, what your children have done. They're going to hate me, I said. They already see you as a bank account, not a mother, Geneva said bluntly. Zelma, you're protecting yourself from people who were willing to forge documents and steal from you. That's not hate, that's survival. That evening, around 8 p.m., Pauline and Curtis returned to my hospital room carrying a briefcase. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be asleep. Is she asleep? Curtis whispered. Looks like it, Pauline confirmed. Okay, I have the beneficiary designation forms. We just need her signature on each one. I heard papers rustling. How do we do this without waking her? Curtis asked. Very carefully, Pauline said. You hold the clipboard steady, I'll guide her hand. I felt Pauline lift my right hand. I kept it limp, like I was unconscious. Mama, Pauline said quietly, I need you to sign some papers, just routine hospital paperwork. Can you sign for me? She placed a pen in my fingers and started moving my hand toward paper. Excuse me, what are you doing? A nurse's voice interrupted. It was Viola. Pauline dropped my hand quickly. Oh, just trying to get my mother to sign some insurance forms. Insurance forms, Viola said skeptically, walking over. May I see them? They're private, Curtis said defensively. Sir, if you're trying to get a patient to sign legal documents while they're sedated, that's illegal, Viola said firmly. I'm going to have to ask you both to leave. We're her children, Pauline protested. We have a right to be here. Not if you're trying to coerce her into signing documents, Viola said. Please leave now, or I'll call security. This is ridiculous, Curtis said angrily, but they gathered their papers and left. After they were gone, I opened my eyes. Thank you. Were they really trying to forge your signature? Viola asked. Yes, I confirmed. On beneficiary forms, to gain access to my accounts. I'm documenting this in your medical chart, Viola said. And I'm adding a note that no legal documents should be signed without your lawyer present. Mrs. Patterson, your children are dangerous. I know, I whispered. I'm finally seeing who they really are. The next morning, a video camera was set up in my hospital room for the court hearing. On the screen, I could see Judge Thaddeus Hayes at his bench, Geneva sitting at one table, and Pauline and Curtis at another table with their hastily hired lawyer, Floyd Turner. This is an emergency hearing regarding the financial affairs of Zelma Patterson, Judge Hayes began. Mrs. Patterson has petitioned for an emergency injunction freezing her assets and protection from alleged financial exploitation by her children. Mrs. Patterson, can you hear me? Yes, Your Honor, I said from my hospital bed. How are you feeling? Judge Hayes asked kindly. Much better than my children expected, I said. I've reviewed the petition, Judge Hayes said. Mrs. Foster, please present your case. Geneva stood. Your Honor, 3 days ago, Mrs. Patterson suffered a serious heart attack. While she was in surgery and recovery, her children, Pauline and Curtis, took her house keys and went to her home without permission. They accessed her private papers, reviewed her financial documents, and discussed how they would divide her assets. That's not true, Pauline burst out. Ms. Patterson, you'll have your turn, Judge Hayes said sternly. Continue, Mrs. Foster. Mrs. Patterson overheard her children saying, and I quote, She probably won't make it through the night. And Curtis responded, "Good. That means we can finally get what's ours," Geneva continued. "They counted her as dead before she'd even died." "Your Honor, we were upset," Pauline protested. "We said things in grief." "Ms. Patterson, I won't warn you again," Judge Hayes interrupted. "Mrs. Foster." Yesterday evening, while Mrs. Patterson was recovering in the hospital, her children attempted to forge her signature on beneficiary designation forms that would have given them immediate access to her bank accounts, Geneva concluded. A nurse witnessed this attempt and documented it in the medical records. "Is this true?" Judge Hayes asked, looking at Pauline and Curtis. Their lawyer, Floyd Turner, stood. "Your Honor, my clients were simply trying to help their elderly mother with paperwork." "By forging her signature while she was sedated?" Judge Hayes asked sharply. "It wasn't forgery," Floyd claimed. "They were guiding her hand." "That's the definition of forgery," Judge Hayes said. "Mrs. Patterson, can you tell me in your own words what happened?" I took a deep breath and told the truth. About 8 years of my children pressuring me to hand over my assets. About the documents they'd tried to trick me into signing. About what I'd overheard them say outside my hospital room. About them attempting to forge my signature last night. "And yesterday, when the nurse called your daughter to tell her you'd survived the surgery, what was her reaction?" Judge Hayes asked. "She said, 'What? That's impossible,'" I recited. "Not thank God or I'm so happy. Just shock that I was alive." Judge Hayes looked at Pauline. "Ms. Patterson, is that true?" "I was just surprised," Pauline said weakly. The doctor had said your mother might not survive," Judge Hayes interrupted. "A normal reaction to learning she did survive would be relief and joy, not dismay." Pauline had no response. "Your Honor, my clients are the victims here," Floyd tried. "Their elderly mother is turning on them, making wild accusations." "The accusations are documented by hospital staff," Judge Hayes said. "And I've read the nurse's report about the attempted signature forgery. Mr. Turner, your clients were caught red-handed trying to commit fraud." Judge Hayes reviewed his notes, then made his ruling. "I'm granting the emergency injunction," Judge Hayes announced. "Mrs. Patterson's assets are frozen. Her children are prohibited from accessing her bank accounts, entering her property, or contacting her without her consent." "Your Honor, that's not fair," Curtis burst out. "What's not fair is children trying to steal from their dying mother," Judge Hayes said coldly. "I'm also ordering a full investigation into whether criminal charges should be filed for attempted fraud and elder financial abuse. Additionally," Judge Hayes continued, "I'm appointing an independent guardian ad litem to review Mrs. Patterson's situation and make recommendations to the court about permanent protective measures." "Your Honor, we're her children," Pauline protested. "She's our mother, we have rights." "You have the right to treat your mother with respect and dignity," Judge Hayes said. "You've done neither. This hearing is adjourned. The injunction stands. Ms. Patterson and Mr. Patterson, consider yourselves warned. Any attempt to contact your mother or access her property will result in immediate arrest." The video feed ended. I sat in my hospital bed, shaking, tears streaming down my face. My own children, my Bobbies whom I'd raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally. And they'd been willing to forge documents, steal from me, and abandon me for dead just to get my money. But I'd survived, and now they were exposed. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now, smash that like button, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Should Zelma press criminal charges? Would you ever forgive your children for this? Where are you watching from? 1 week after the emergency court hearing, I was released from the hospital and returned to my house. My locks changed, my assets protected, my children legally prohibited from contacting me. But the investigation was just beginning. The guardian ad litem appointed by the court, Curtis Shaw, no relation to my son, came to visit me at home 2 days after my release. "Mrs. Patterson, I'm here to assess your situation and make recommendations to the court," Curtis Shaw explained. He was a serious man in his 50s who specialized in elder protection cases. I need to understand the full extent of what your children have done. Where do I even start? I asked. Let's start with your house, Curtis Shaw said. Your children had access to your house for approximately 12 hours while you were in surgery and recovery. What did they do during that time? I don't know, I admitted. I haven't fully inventoried everything yet. Let's do that now, Curtis Shaw suggested. For the next 3 hours, we walked through my house cataloging what was missing or disturbed. The discoveries were devastating. In my bedroom, my jewelry box had been emptied. Gone were my wedding ring, set that Theodore had given me, worth about $8,000. My grandmother's antique brooch, priceless family heirloom. A diamond necklace Theodore bought for our 25th anniversary, $5,000. Various other pieces, totaling another $3,000. In my home office, my filing cabinet had been rifled through. Missing were my most recent will, dated 2 years ago. Bank statements from the past year. Investment account statements. Property deed to my house. Theodore's life insurance policy documents. In my living room, Theodore's vintage watch collection, worth approximately $15,000. Several pieces of artwork, $6,000 total. My mother's antique china set, $4,000. In the guest room closet, Theodore's coin collection that he'd spent 40 years building, worth $25,000. Curtis Shaw documented everything with photographs and detailed notes. This is significant theft, Curtis Shaw said. We're looking at over $65,000 in stolen property plus irreplaceable family heirlooms, and the missing legal documents suggest they were planning to destroy evidence or forge new documents. Can we prove they took these things? I asked. Do you have anyone who saw these items recently? Curtis Shaw asked. My neighbor Letty, I said. She was here 2 weeks ago for tea. She commented on how beautiful my grandmother's brooch was. I was wearing it that day. That's a witness, Curtis Shaw said. And the timing is crucial. 2 weeks ago, you definitely had the brooch. Now, after your children had access to your house, it's gone. That establishes opportunity and timeline. What about my legal documents? I asked. Why would they take my will? Several possibilities, Curtis Shaw said grimly. They might want to forge a new will that benefits them more, or they might want to destroy a will that doesn't favor them. Either way, it's evidence of criminal intent. I have copies of everything at my lawyer's office, I said. Geneva has duplicate copies of my will and all my important documents. That's very fortunate, Curtis Shaw said. Because if your children had succeeded in destroying the originals and you had no copies, they could have claimed you died intestate, without a will, and they'd inherit everything automatically under state law. The calculated cruelty of their plan made me feel sick. 3 days later, Geneva called me with disturbing news. Zelma, I've been reviewing your bank records as part of the guardianship investigation, Geneva said, and I found something very concerning. What? I asked nervously. 3 days before your heart attack, there was a $50,000 withdrawal from your savings account, Geneva said. That's impossible, I said. I didn't withdraw $50,000. I know, Geneva said. That's why it's concerning. I contacted the bank to get details. The withdrawal was made in person at a branch across town. And Zelma, the signature on the withdrawal slip doesn't match your signature. Someone forged my signature, I asked, though I already knew who. It appears so, Geneva confirmed. I'm requesting surveillance footage from the bank. But Zelma, if your children forged a withdrawal slip and stole $50,000 from your account 3 days before your heart attack, that's premeditated theft. They were planning to steal from me even before I was sick, I realized. And the timing suggests they might have been worried you were getting suspicious, Geneva added. You'd refused to sign their power of attorney documents. You'd consulted with me about protecting your assets. They may have decided to steal what they could before you shut them out completely. Can we prove it was them? I asked. That's what the surveillance footage will show, Geneva said. The bank is pulling it now. 2 days later, Geneva came to my house with a laptop. I have the bank surveillance footage, Geneva said. Zelma, you need to prepare yourself. This is going to be upsetting. She opened the laptop and played the video. The footage showed Pauline walking into the bank, approaching a teller, and handing over what appeared to be a withdrawal slip and my ID. My ID that should have been in my wallet, which meant they'd stolen it before going to the bank. The teller processed the withdrawal. Pauline signed something, presumably the withdrawal slip with my forged signature. Then the teller counted out $50,000 in cash and handed it to Pauline in a bank envelope. Pauline walked out of the bank with $50,000 of my money. This was 3 days before your heart attack, Geneva said, which means this theft occurred while you were healthy, conscious, and fully competent. They can't claim they were just trying to help you or protect you. This was pure theft. Why didn't the bank question it? I asked. Banks don't typically question withdrawals made by someone with valid ID and a signed withdrawal slip, Geneva explained. The teller had no reason to suspect fraud, but Zelma, this is clear evidence of identity theft and bank fraud. What do we do? I asked. We turn this evidence over to the district attorney, Geneva said. This, combined with the stolen property from your house and the attempted signature forgery at the hospital, builds a strong case for criminal prosecution. 1 week later, I met with District Attorney Minnie Lewis at her office. Mrs. Patterson, I've reviewed all the evidence compiled by your attorney and the guardian ad litem, DA Lewis said. And I want you to know, what your children did to you is criminal. Clear, documented, prosecutable crimes. What crimes specifically? I asked. Identity theft, bank fraud, forgery, attempted forgery, elder financial abuse, and theft, DA Lewis listed. We have bank surveillance showing your daughter stealing $50,000. We have a nurse's testimony about attempted signature forgery. We have documentation of stolen property worth over $65,000. Are you going to prosecute? I asked. That depends partly on you, DA Lewis said. Mrs. Patterson, I can file charges with or without your cooperation, but cases are stronger when the victim is willing to testify. Are you willing to testify against your children? I sat there wrestling with the question. These were my bobbies, the children I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. But they'd stolen from me, left me for dead, counted my money before I was even gone. Yes, I finally said, I'll testify. Good, DA Lewis said. Because Mrs. Patterson, here's what I think happened. Your children have been planning this theft for years. When you had your first heart attack a year ago, they saw an opportunity. They started pressuring you more aggressively to sign over your assets. When you refused and consulted with your lawyer, they got desperate, DA Lewis continued. So 3 days before your second heart attack, they stole your ID and forged a withdrawal slip to steal $50,000 from your bank account. That's premeditated theft. Then you had your second heart attack, DA Lewis said. And instead of being concerned about you, they saw it as an opportunity to steal everything else. They took your house keys, went to your home, and stole $65,000 worth of jewelry, collectibles, and legal documents. They were so confident you were dying that they didn't even try to hide what they were doing, DA Lewis concluded. They just took everything they could carry. And then when I didn't die, they tried to forge my signature on bank forms to legitimize their access to my accounts, I added. Exactly, DA Lewis said. This is systematic, premeditated elder financial abuse, and I'm going to prosecute it to the fullest extent of the law. What kind of sentences are we talking about? I asked. If convicted on all counts, your children could each face 5 to 10 years in prison, DA Lewis said. 10 years. My children could go to prison for 10 years. Part of me felt guilty for even considering it, but another part of me, the part that had been betrayed, stolen from, and left for dead, felt they deserved consequences. 2 days later, Pauline and Curtis were arrested. I wasn't present for the arrests, but Geneva told me what happened. Police showed up at Pauline's house at 6 a.m. with an arrest warrant. Pauline was taken into custody, booked on charges of identity theft, bank fraud, forgery, and elder financial abuse. The same thing happened to Curtis an hour later. Both were held on $50,000 bail each, the exact amount they'd stolen from my bank account. Neither could afford bail, so they sat in jail awaiting arraignment. And that evening, my phone started ringing. Not Pauline or Curtis, they weren't allowed to contact me because of the restraining order, but other family members. My sister Opal called first. "Zelma, what have you done?" Opal demanded. "Pauline called me from jail. You had your own children arrested." "They stole over $100,000 from me," I said calmly. "They left me for dead and tried to steal my house." "They're your children," Opal protested. "You can't send your own children to prison." "They can send themselves to prison by committing crimes," I corrected. "Family doesn't do this to family," Opal said. "You're right," I agreed. "Family doesn't steal from dying parents, but mine did." "You're being vindictive," Opal accused. "You're punishing them because they didn't act the way you wanted." "I'm holding them accountable for committing crimes," I interrupted. "Opal, they forged my signature on a bank withdrawal slip and stole $50,000. That's on surveillance camera. It's not a family dispute. It's bank fraud." "But they're going to prison," Opal said. "Your grandchildren will grow up without parents." "My children are adults who made choices," I said. "They chose to steal from me. They chose to commit fraud. Those choices have consequences." "I can't believe you're doing this," Opal said. "Your mother would be ashamed." "My mother would be ashamed that her grandchildren stole from me," I corrected. "Goodbye, Opal." I hung up. Over the next few days, I received similar calls from cousins, nieces, nephews, all of them telling me I was wrong, cruel, vindictive for turning on my own family. None of them acknowledged what my children had actually done. None of them seemed to care that I'd been stolen from, that my children had literally counted me as dead before I died. They just cared that I was breaking the unspoken family rule. You don't hold family accountable publicly. But I was done with that rule. 1 week after their arrest, Pauline and Curtis had their arraignment hearing. I attended via video conference from my lawyer's office. I still wasn't strong enough to go to the courthouse, and the restraining order prohibited me from being in the same physical space as my children anyway. Pauline and Curtis stood before Judge Geneva Stone, both in orange jail jumpsuits, both looking exhausted and angry. The charges were read. Pauline Patterson. Identity theft in the first degree, felony. Bank fraud, felony. Forgery in the first degree, felony. Attempted forgery, felony. Elder financial abuse, felony. Theft in the first degree, felony. Curtis Patterson. Identity theft in the first degree, felony. Conspiracy to commit bank fraud, felony. Elder financial abuse, felony. Theft in the first degree, felony. "How do you plead?" Judge Stone asked. "Not guilty," Pauline said firmly. "Not guilty," Curtis echoed. Their lawyer, Floyd Turner, stood. "Your Honor, my clients are innocent. This is a family dispute being criminalized by an elderly woman who is angry that her children tried to help her manage her finances." "Mr. Turner, your clients are on surveillance camera stealing $50,000 from the victim's bank account," Judge Stone interrupted. "That's not helping with finances. That's bank fraud." "The victim is my client's mother," Floyd argued. "They had reason to believe she wanted them to have access to her accounts." "Did they have written authorization?" Judge Stone asked. "No, but—" "Did the victim sign the withdrawal slip?" Judge Stone pressed. "The victim was incapacitated," Floyd tried. "The theft occurred 3 days before the victim's heart attack," Judge Stone said, reading from the file. "She was fully competent at the time. Your clients forged her signature. That's fraud." Floyd had no response. "Bail is set at $50,000 each," Judge Stone ruled. "Trial is scheduled for 3 months from today." Pauline's face crumpled. Your Honor, I can't afford $50,000 bail. Perhaps you should have thought of that before stealing $50,000 from your mother, Judge Stone said coldly. That evening, I received a call from the jail. It was a collect call from Pauline. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. Hello, I said. Mama, Pauline's voice came through, tearful and desperate. Mama, please, you have to drop the charges. I can't stay in jail. I have children. I have a job, please. You should have thought of that before you stole from me, I said quietly. I didn't steal, Pauline insisted. I was just trying to help. Stop lying, I interrupted. I've seen the surveillance footage. You walked into the bank with my ID and a forged withdrawal slip. You took $50,000 in cash. That's theft. We needed the money, Pauline admitted, her story changing. Curtis and I both have financial problems. We were going to pay you back. When? I challenged. After I died. Pauline was silent. You weren't planning to pay me back, I said. You were planning to steal everything I had while I was too sick to stop you. And when I had a heart attack, you saw it as your opportunity. We didn't know you were going to survive, Pauline burst out. The admission hung in the air. So because you thought I was dying, it was okay to steal from me, I asked. That's not what I meant, Pauline backtracked. Yes, it is, I said. Pauline, you and Curtis stood in my hospital room discussing how to divide up my money while I was in surgery. You went to my house and stole jewelry, documents, collectibles. You tried to forge my signature on bank forms. And when I survived, your first reaction wasn't relief, it was disappointment. I was just shocked, Pauline protested weakly. You were disappointed, I corrected, because my survival meant you couldn't steal everything you'd planned to steal. Mama, please, Pauline begged. I'm sorry, I'll return everything. I'll pay back the $50,000, just drop the charges, please. I'm your daughter, don't you love me? I do love you, I said, tears forming. But loving you doesn't mean letting you steal from me. Loving you doesn't mean protecting you from consequences. So you're really going to let me go to prison? Pauline asked, her voice breaking. You're going to send yourself to prison by being convicted of crimes you committed, I corrected. I didn't force you to forge my signature. I didn't force you to steal from my bank account. I didn't force you to rob my house. You made those choices. I hate you, Pauline said coldly. You hated me before, I said. You just hid it better. Goodbye, Pauline. I hung up. And I cried. For hours, I cried. For the children I thought I had. For the family I thought I'd built. For 50 years of love that had been revealed as conditional on me having money they could inherit. But I didn't drop the charges. Before I continue, kindly subscribe now. Smash that like button and turn on notifications. Drop a comment. Is Zelma doing the right thing? Would you testify against your children? Where are you watching from? 3 months after my children were arrested, I sat in the courtroom for their criminal trial, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. Pauline and Curtis sat at the defendant's table, both looking thinner and older than they had just 3 months ago. Jail had aged them, or perhaps the weight of their crimes had finally caught up with them. They wouldn't look at me. Not once during jury selection, not during opening statements, not even when I took the stand to testify. District Attorney Minnie Lewis presented the prosecution's case with devastating precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, DA Lewis began, this case is about 2 adult children who saw their elderly mother not as a person to love and care for, but as a bank account waiting to be emptied. DA Lewis laid out the timeline methodically. 8 years of pressure. After their father died, Pauline and Curtis immediately began pressuring me to sell my house, transfer assets, sign over control. Every family gathering became a negotiation about my money. 6 months ago, they brought documents that would have given them complete control of my finances. When I refused to sign and consulted my lawyer, they realized their time was running out. 3 days before my heart attack, surveillance footage showed Pauline entering a bank with my stolen ID and a withdrawal slip with my forged signature. She walked out with $50,000 in cash. The night of my heart attack, while I was in surgery fighting for my life, Pauline and Curtis took my house keys and went to my home. They stole $65,000 worth of jewelry, collectibles, and legal documents. They were literally dividing up my belongings before I was even dead. The next day, when I miraculously survived, they attempted to forge my signature on bank beneficiary forms while I was sedated. A nurse witnessed and documented this attempt. These weren't acts of desperation, DA Lewis concluded. These were calculated, premeditated crimes committed by two people who valued money more than their own mother's life. The defense attorney, Floyd Turner, tried to argue that Pauline and Curtis were just trying to help me and that this was a family misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. When I took the stand, DA Lewis walked me through my testimony gently. Mrs. Patterson, can you describe your relationship with your children before these events? DA Lewis asked. I thought we had a good relationship, I said. I thought they loved me. I gave them everything, paid for their education, helped with their homes, was always there when they needed me. When did that relationship change? DA Lewis asked. When their father died, I said. Suddenly, every conversation became about my money, my house, what they would inherit. They stopped seeing me as their mother and started seeing me as an obstacle to their inheritance. Can you describe what you overheard outside your hospital room the night of your heart attack? DA Lewis asked. I took a deep breath and recited the conversation that was burned into my memory. Pauline said, the doctor said she probably won't make it through the night. And Curtis said, good, that means we can finally get what's ours. Then Pauline suggested they go to my house immediately to start sorting through things before I was even dead. Several jurors gasped. I saw one woman wipe tears from her eyes. How did that make you feel? DA Lewis asked. Heartbroken, I admitted. These were my children. I'd given birth to them, raised them, loved them unconditionally, and they were counting down the hours until I died so they could steal from me. When you woke up the next morning and learned you'd survived, what did you do? DA Lewis asked. I called my lawyer, I said, because I realized my children weren't going to stop trying to steal from me. I needed to protect myself. From your own children, DA Lewis prompted. Yes, I confirmed, from my own children. Floyd Turner tried to discredit my testimony during cross-examination. Mrs. Patterson, isn't it true that you're 72 years old and were heavily medicated after surgery? Floyd began. Yes, I confirmed. So isn't it possible you misheard or misunderstood what your children said? Floyd suggested. No, I said firmly. I heard them clearly. They said I probably wouldn't make it through the night, and Curtis said good. But you were sedated, Floyd pressed. You could have been confused. I was conscious enough to call my lawyer the next morning and recount the entire conversation, I interrupted. I was conscious enough to tell her exactly what they'd said. That's documented in her notes. Floyd switched tactics. Mrs. Patterson, isn't it true that you've given your children money many times over the years? Yes, I admitted. Doesn't that establish a pattern of financial support? Floyd asked. Doesn't that suggest they had reason to believe you wanted them to have access to your money? I gave them money as gifts when they asked, I explained. That's different from them stealing from my bank account without permission. I never authorized that $50,000 withdrawal. But you've always been generous with your children, Floyd insisted. Isn't it possible they thought? Are you seriously arguing that because I was a generous mother, my children were justified in committing bank fraud? I asked incredulously. Several jurors nodded. Even the judge looked skeptical of Floyd's argument. No further questions, Floyd said, sitting down. The most damaging evidence came when DA Lewis played the bank surveillance footage for the jury. The video showed Pauline, clear as day, walking into the bank, approaching the teller, and handing over identification and a withdrawal slip. A handwriting expert testified that the signature on the withdrawal slip was not mine, but appeared to be written by Pauline based on comparison samples. She forged her mother's signature, the expert stated clearly. This is not the victim's handwriting. The teller who'd processed the transaction testified that she'd had no reason to suspect fraud because the person had valid ID and a signed withdrawal slip. But looking back now, the teller said, I realized the woman who made the withdrawal was much younger than the age on the ID. I should have questioned it. Don't blame yourself, DA Lewis said kindly. The defendants committed fraud, that's not your fault. Nurse Viola testified about witnessing Pauline and Curtis attempting to forge my signature. I walked into Mrs. Patterson's room and saw the daughter holding Mrs. Patterson's hand, trying to guide it to sign papers, Viola stated. Mrs. Patterson was sedated and clearly not conscious enough to understand what she was signing. What did you do? DA Lewis asked. I stopped them immediately, Viola said. I asked to see the papers. They claimed they were insurance forms, but when I examined them, they were beneficiary designation forms for bank accounts. Did the defendants seem concerned about being caught? DA Lewis asked. No, Viola said. They seemed annoyed that I'd interrupted them. They acted like they had every right to forge their unconscious mother's signature. What happened next? DA Lewis asked. I told them to leave or I'd call security, Viola said. They left, but I immediately documented the incident in Mrs. Patterson's medical chart and notified hospital administration. Floyd tried to discredit Viola's testimony by suggesting she'd misunderstood the situation, but Viola was unshakable. Sir, I've been a nurse for 25 years, Viola said firmly. I know the difference between helping a patient sign necessary medical documents and attempting to commit fraud. What I witnessed was fraud. Against their lawyer's advice, both Pauline and Curtis chose to testify in their own defense. It was a disaster. Pauline claimed she'd withdrawn the $50,000 with my verbal permission. Your mother testified she never gave you permission, DA Lewis said during cross-examination. In fact, she didn't even know about the withdrawal until after her heart attack. She probably forgot, Pauline claimed. She's old, her memory isn't good. Mrs. Patterson's medical records show no signs of dementia or memory loss, DA Lewis countered. She's completely cognitively intact, so either she's lying or you are. Which is it? Pauline had no good answer. Curtis's testimony was even worse. He admitted to going to my house the night of my heart attack. We wanted to make sure everything was secure, Curtis claimed. By stealing your mother's jewelry and your father's coin collection, DA Lewis asked. We weren't stealing, Curtis insisted. We were preserving family heirlooms. By taking them from your mother's house without permission while she was unconscious in a hospital, DA Lewis pressed. She was dying, Curtis burst out. We thought she was dying, we were getting ready for when she passed. So you admit you took items from her house believing she was dying, DA Lewis confirmed. Curtis realized his mistake too late. I mean, we were just looking at things. You were caught on your mother's home security camera carrying out boxes, DA Lewis said, introducing new evidence. These cameras show you and your sister removing multiple items from the residence. I hadn't known I had security cameras. They'd been installed by my home insurance company 2 years ago, and I'd forgotten about them. But apparently they'd captured everything. The jury watched footage of Pauline and Curtis carrying out boxes, bags, and cases from my house. At one point, the footage showed Curtis looking directly at the camera and saying to Pauline, "Don't worry, she's dying. She'll never see this footage." The courtroom went silent. Even Floyd looked defeated. In closing arguments, DA Lewis was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the evidence. You've heard the testimony. You've watched surveillance footage of these defendants stealing from their dying mother, DA Lewis said. The defense wants you to believe this was a family misunderstanding. But there's no misunderstanding bank fraud. There's no misunderstanding theft. There's no misunderstanding attempting to forge a signature while your mother is sedated in a hospital bed. These defendants didn't see their mother as a person, DA Lewis continued. They saw her as money, and when they thought she was dying, they moved quickly to steal everything they could before she was even gone. The most chilling evidence in this case isn't the surveillance footage or the forged signatures, DA Lewis concluded. It's what Curtis said on that home security footage. Don't worry, she's dying. She'll never see this. They were so confident she would die that they didn't even try to hide their crimes. But Zelma Patterson didn't die. She survived. And now these defendants must face justice for what they did. Floyd's closing argument tried to paint Pauline and Curtis as confused, well-meaning children who made mistakes. But the jury wasn't buying it. After only 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdicts. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Stone asked. We have, Your Honor, the jury foreman said. On the charge of identity theft in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. On the charge of bank fraud, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. On the charge of forgery in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. On the charge of attempted forgery, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. On the charge of elder financial abuse, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. On the charge of theft in the first degree, how do you find the defendant Pauline Patterson? Guilty. Guilty on all charges. The same verdicts came for Curtis, guilty on all counts. Pauline started crying. Curtis put his head in his hands. Their lawyer looked defeated. Judge Stone scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, I returned to court for sentencing. DA Lewis argued for maximum sentences. Your Honor, these defendants showed no remorse, DA Lewis said. Even during trial, they continued to claim they were helping their mother. They've taken no responsibility for their crimes. Floyd argued for leniency. Your Honor, these are first-time offenders with families who depend on them, Floyd pleaded. Prison sentences would devastate their children. Their children should have thought about that before they committed felonies. Judge Stone interrupted. Judge Stone asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I did. I stood at the podium and looked at my children. My Bobbies, now 50 and 48 years old, convicted felons. Pauline and Curtis, you are my children, I began, my voice shaking. I gave birth to you. I raised you. I loved you unconditionally for your entire lives. When your father died, I thought we would grieve together, I continued. Instead, you saw his death as an opportunity. An opportunity to pressure me, manipulate me, and eventually steal from me. You didn't wait for me to die naturally, I said. You counted down the hours until my death like you were waiting for a store to open. And when you thought I was dying, you robbed my house before my body was even cold. The most heartbreaking moment of my life, I said, tears streaming down my face, was hearing you say good when you thought I wouldn't survive the night. What kind of children feel relief at their mother's impending death? You taught me a painful lesson, I concluded. That being a good mother, sacrificing everything, giving unconditionally, none of that guarantees your children will love you back. Sometimes it just teaches them to take you for granted. I hope prison teaches you what my love couldn't teach you, I finished. How to value people for who they are, not what they have. How to treat others with respect and dignity. How to take responsibility for your actions. I still love you, I said, but I will never trust you again, and I will never let you hurt me again. I sat down. Judge Stone took a long moment before speaking. Pauline Patterson and Curtis Patterson, you have been convicted of multiple felonies against your own mother, Judge Stone began. The evidence showed calculated, premeditated crimes. You forged your mother's signature to steal $50,000. You robbed her house while she was unconscious in a hospital. You attempted to forge her signature again while she was sedated. What strikes me most about this case, Judge Stone continued, is your complete lack of empathy. You were so focused on money that you forgot your mother was a human being who loved you. On the charges of identity theft, bank fraud, and forgery, Judge Stone announced, I sentence Pauline Patterson to 6 years in state prison. On the charges of elder financial abuse and theft, I sentence Pauline Patterson to an additional 3 years, to run consecutively. Total sentence, 9 years in state prison. Pauline gasped. 9 years. She'd be 57 when she got out. Curtis Patterson, on the charges of identity theft, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, elder financial abuse, and theft, I sentence you to 7 years in state prison. Curtis would be 52 when released. Additionally, Judge Stone said, both defendants are ordered to pay full restitution to their mother, $115,000 total, representing the stolen cash and property. You're also prohibited from contacting the victim for the duration of your sentences and 5 years after release, Judge Stone concluded. Do you have anything to say? Judge Stone asked. Pauline stood crying. Mama, I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. But I just looked at her calmly. After everything, after the trial, after hearing all the evidence repeated, she still wanted something from me. Forgiveness, absolution, permission to not feel guilty. I said nothing. Curtis didn't speak at all. He just looked at me with something between anger and despair. Bailiffs took them away to begin their sentences. And I walked out of that courtroom a free woman. 6 months after my children went to prison, I sat on my renovated porch watching the sunset and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. My health had improved dramatically. Regular cardio rehabilitation, a healthy diet, less stress. I was doing better at 73 than I had at 72. My house was mine again. I'd changed all the locks, installed a new security system, and redecorated to remove reminders of the children who'd betrayed me. I'd replaced the stolen jewelry with new pieces that held no painful memories. I'd started new collections to replace Theodore's stolen items, not the same, but mine. Most importantly, I'd rebuilt my life around people who valued me for who I was, not what I had. My neighbor Letty checked on me daily. My lawyer Geneva had become a genuine friend. I'd joined a support group for elder financial abuse survivors and found community with others who understood. I'd also created a trust and new will with very specific terms. When I died, my estate would be divided equally among my grandchildren, held in trust until they turned 30. Pauline and Curtis would receive nothing. If they objected or contested the will, they'd be cut out entirely, and their children's shares would go to charity. Geneva had made it ironclad. My children would never profit from my death. 1 year after Pauline and Curtis went to prison, I received a letter from Pauline. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won. Dear Mama, I'm writing from prison. I've been here for a year now, with 8 more to go. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to say things I should have said years ago. You were right about everything. We did see you as money, not as a person. We did count down the hours until your death. We did steal from you without remorse. The counselor here has helped me understand something. I was raised with love and generosity, and I repaid it with greed and betrayal. That wasn't your failure as a mother. It was my failure as a daughter. For 48 years, you gave me everything. And I never once said thank you. I never appreciated your sacrifices. I just took and took and took. When you had your heart attack, my first thought wasn't, I hope she survives. It was, finally, we can get the inheritance. What kind of daughter thinks that way? I'm ashamed, not because I got caught, not because I'm in prison, but because I finally see what I did to you. I stole your money. I stole your security. I stole your peace. And worst of all, I stole 8 years of what should have been a loving relationship between a mother and her children. I can't give any of that back. I can't undo the harm I caused. All I can do is apologize and promise that prison is changing me. I don't know if I'll ever see you again. I don't know if you'll ever want to see me. But Mama, I need you to know you did nothing wrong. You were a wonderful mother. I was a terrible daughter. I love you, and I'm sorry. Pauline. I read the letter 3 times. Was it genuine? I didn't know. Maybe maybe not. Maybe Pauline was truly remorseful. Maybe she just wanted to say what she thought I wanted to hear. But it didn't matter, because my peace no longer depended on my children's remorse or transformation. I'd reclaimed my life. I'd protected myself. I'd held them accountable. And whether they changed or not, I was free. 2 years into their sentences, both Pauline and Curtis were eligible for a parole hearing. The parole board contacted me to ask if I wanted to provide a statement supporting or opposing their parole. I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted them to serve every day of their sentences. They'd stolen from me, abandoned me for dead, shown no remorse until facing consequences. But another part of me, the mother who'd loved them for their entire lives, wondered if 2 years in prison had been enough to change them. I called D.A. Lewis for advice. "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "That's up to you, Zelma," D.A. Lewis said. "But I'll tell you this, true change takes years, not months. 2 years in prison is a start, but it's not transformation." "So you think they should serve their full sentences?" I asked. "I think they should serve enough time to truly understand what they did," D.A. Lewis said. "Whether that's 9 years or 5 years or 2 years, I can't say. Only you can judge whether they've changed." In the end, I didn't support their parole. Not out of vengeance, but because I'd learned something important. I didn't owe my children anything anymore. I'd given them life, love, education, support for 50 years. They'd repaid me with theft and betrayal. I'd pressed charges and testified not to punish them, but to protect myself and hold them accountable. Whether they got out of prison in 2 years or 9 years was between them and the parole board. My role wasn't to forgive or facilitate their release. My role was to live my life in peace. 3 years after my family abandoned me for dead, I sat in my beautiful, peaceful home and reflected on how much had changed. I was 75 years old and healthier than I'd been in years. My heart was strong. My mind was sharp. My life was full. I'd traveled to places Theodore and I had always talked about visiting. I'd taken painting classes and discovered I had talent. I'd volunteered at an elder abuse prevention organization, sharing my story to help others. I'd made peace with what happened. Not by forgiving my children, forgiveness wasn't required for peace, but by accepting that they'd made choices, I'd made choices in response, and everyone lived with the consequences. Pauline and Curtis remained in prison, still serving their sentences. I hadn't visited, hadn't written, hadn't sent money to their commissary accounts. I'd simply let them go. The family members who'd criticized me for pressing charges, most had eventually come around when they understood the full extent of what Pauline and Curtis had done. A few still held grudges. I didn't care. My grandchildren, Pauline and Curtis's kids, reached out to me occasionally. I'd responded carefully, making sure they understood. I loved them, but I couldn't have relationships with people who would report back to their parents about my money or assets. They'd have their inheritances when I died, held in trust. Until then, we kept our distance. That night 3 years ago, when my family left me for dead in a hospital room and drove to my house to steal my belongings, they thought they'd won. But the next morning, I woke up. And in waking up, I exposed them. Exposed their greed, their cruelty, their willingness to abandon their dying mother for money. The court had given them justice, 9 and 7 years in prison. But I'd given myself something more valuable, freedom. Freedom from children who saw me as a bank account. Freedom from guilt about protecting myself. Freedom from the obligation to sacrifice endlessly for people who didn't appreciate it. My family had abandoned me for dead. But I didn't die. I lived, I fought back, I reclaimed my peace. And 3 years later, that peace was complete, unshakable, and entirely mine. Pauline Ann Curtis went to prison, found guilty on all charges: identity theft, bank fraud, forgery, elder abuse, theft. Pauline sentenced to 9 years. Curtis sentenced to 7 years, ordered to pay $115,000 restitution. Judge said, "You forgot your mother was a human being who loved you." Zelma gave powerful victim impact statement. You counted down the hours until my death like waiting for a store to open. You taught me that being a good mother doesn't guarantee your children will love you back. 1 year later, Pauline wrote from prison. I finally see what I did. You were a wonderful mother. I was a terrible daughter. But Zelma's peace doesn't depend on their remorse. 2 years in, they applied for parole. Zelma didn't support it. 3 years later, at 75, Zelma is thriving, healthier, traveling, painting, volunteering. Her children are still in prison. Her grandchildren will inherit through trust. Pauline and Curtis get nothing. New will is ironclad. This story proves that you don't owe toxic family anything. Holding people accountable is self-love, not revenge. Peace doesn't require forgiveness. Being a good parent doesn't guarantee good children. It's never too late to protect yourself. You can survive family betrayal and thrive. If this story inspired you, please subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories. Smash that like button. Turn on notifications for new content. Drop a comment. What part of Zelma's journey inspired you most? Do you think she should ever reconcile with her children? Where are you watching from? United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Jamaica, South Africa, Australia, Trinidad, India, Philippines? Let me know. Remember, if family members are financially exploiting you, treating you as an inheritance instead of a person, or stealing from you, protect yourself. Contact a lawyer. Press charges if necessary. You are not obligated to let family abuse you just because they're family. Real love doesn't steal. Real love doesn't abandon. Real love doesn't count down the hours until you die. Zelma's family abandoned her for dead, stole $115,000, and went to her house to divide her belongings before she was even gone. The next morning, she woke up and exposed everything. 3 years later, they're in prison and she has complete peace. May this story inspire you to never let anyone, even family, exploit or abuse you. Thank you for following this powerful journey from abandonment to justice, from betrayal to peace, from victimhood to complete freedom. Until the next story, stay strong, protect yourself, and remember that you deserve peace, dignity, and respect always.